Hi everyone, welcome back to my number sense series. In this video, we're going to be doing a special kind of problem. A kind of problem where they ask you what is blank percent of blank. In other words, I call it multiplying with percentages. Now, just to review why it's called multiplying with percentages, recall that when we see the word of in math, it basically always means a multiplication. And remember also that a percentage just means over 100. So really, this question is just asking, what's 75 over 100 times 36? And this is a very easy question to do, right? Because, well, there's two ways to do this question, and there's two ways to do all of these questions. Now, for this question, you can recognize 75% is just 3/4. 3/4 times 36, that's pretty easy, it's just 27. But you could also, if you don't recognize this as 3/4 immediately, just do 75 times 36 over 100. In other words, multiply these two numbers, divide by 100. That's just multiplication. So what is 36 times 75? 36 times 75 equals 36 times 3 times 25. 36 times 25. Remember our trick with multiplying by 25 from all the way back then? To multiply by 25, you divide by 4 and multiply by 100. So 36 divided by 4 is 9. 9 times 100. 900 times 3 is 2700. We divide it by 100, remember? So it's 27. Different ways, same answer. So two ways. Recognize it as a fraction and then do the division from there, or multiply, divide by 100. Now, with this question, 16 2/3%. Once again, we have two ways. But this time, the first way gets a little bit harder, and so does the second way, because this is not immediately recognizable to people who haven't done a lot of math before. With more experience, you begin to recognize more and more things in number sense, and this is a really big thing. 16 2/3%, that's actually just 1/6. So if you had a lot of experience, if you recognize this as 1/6, it's just 1/6 times 42, obviously that's 7. But if you can't recognize this immediately, there's nothing wrong with that, because of course we can just do our multiplication. Now, instead of doing 16 2/3 times 42, splitting up the 16 and the 2/3 and multiplying those, we can convert this instead into a mixed number, and converting it into a mixed number is going to make it a lot easier. Now 16 2/3, if we convert that into a mixed number, it's 48 over 3 plus 2 over 3, which is 50 over 3. So 50 over 3 times 42. Now 42 is divisible by 3, so 42 divided by 3 is 14. Now 14 times 50 is, maybe you think of it as 14 divided by 2, then times 100. Anyways, it's 700. But once again, divide by 100, so it's actually just 7. Once again, same answer, two different ways. Now, once again, 14 2/7%, this is another one of those things where if you recognize it, if you have enough experience, it's going to be really easy. But if you don't, it's totally fine. Because 14 2/7%, that's really just 1/7. It's 1/7, and here's the other thing in this problem. 1001. Now, once again, kind of a throwback. But if you remember, when you see the number 1001, you should always think of one important thing. 1001 is 7 times 11 times 13. Okay? And so when you see this, and when you see it especially divided by 7, something should trigger in your brain. Boom. And then we have 11 times 13. Once again, whoa, we can use our 11s trick. Another throwback. 3, 4, 1. 143. Or you could use difference of squares with 12 and 1. Or you just multiply it, whatever you want. But anyways, the answer is 143. But what if you didn't recognize this as 1 over 7? Well, of course you can still do it. Because 14 2/7, if we convert that into a mixed number, that's going to be 14 times 7 plus 2 on the top, 98 plus 2, 100. 100 over 7 times 1001. Well, once again, we have to recognize that 1001 is 7 times 11 times 13. So if we divide that by 7, it's 143. 143 times 100, then divided by 100 again, that's just 143. In other words, you could have just canceled this 100 out right here, and then 1001 divided by 7, basically the same thing. Now, our next problem is going to be 95% of 9300. Now, this time, in my opinion, it is a little bit troublesome to actually convert this into a simplified fraction. Because if you convert it into a simplified fraction, what you're going to get is 19 over 20. And 19 over 20, 9300 to dividing by 20, you might as well just divide it by 100 at that point. It's a lot easier to divide it by 100. And if we divide it by 100, we get access to using another trick. 95 over 100 times 9300. That's equal to, if you divide this by 100, 95 times 93. And this is our trick for multiplying numbers slightly below 100, right? So once again, just to go over the trick, we're going to keep two important numbers in our head. Those two numbers are 5, because this is 100 minus 5, and 7, because this is 100 minus 7. So 5 and 7, okay. Then we think about what's 100 minus 5 minus 7, that is 88. 88, but remember 88 plus 1 because they're both under 100, so it's 89. And then our last two digits are 5 times 7, 8935. And that is pretty much the only way to do this question, because, I mean, if you do this thing again, I mean, you're just doing the same thing. There's no really simplification of the fraction that makes this easier. So here, you can say there's two ways, but really those two ways just lead to you doing the same thing from step one. So really just this trick. Final question, 26 and 2/3% of 48. Now I will admit, 26 and 2/3% is kind of a niche fraction, okay? This fraction is equal to 4 over 15. And if you haven't done a lot of math, I would not blame you at all if you could not recognize this. But 26 and 2/3, that is 4 over 15. You might be able to recognize it because it's 20% plus 6 and 2/3%, which is 1/5 plus 1 over 15. You can kind of think of it that way, but of course, you don't have to. But if you recognize this as 4 over 15, multiplying it by 48, these have a factor of 3 in common, so it's 4 over 5 times 16. 4 times 16 is 64, divided by 5 is going to be 12.8. But once again, you don't have to do that because you can always just multiply these two numbers directly. 26 and 2/3%. If you convert that into a mixed number, what you're going to get is 80 over 3. So 80 over 3 times 48. 48 divided by 3 is 16. So it's 80 times 16 with a percent at the end. 80 times 16 is 1,280. 1,280 divided by 100, and you get 12.8. Once again, the same number, two different ways. So that is generally how to do the questions where they ask you, what is blank percent of blank? And really, it's just super, super easy. Always, you can try to recognize it as a fraction, but if that doesn't work, you could always just multiply and then divide by 100. So I hope that was really helpful to you guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.